Welcome to the Fantasy NASCAR podcast, brought to you by RaceForThePrize.com. Get the spreadsheets, the lap-by-lap data, the advanced AI tools, Venmo, PayPal, Cash App. I'll send you access. Las Vegas, Truck Series, Friday night racing, always an exciting time. My goal here today is to do a quick speed run through the drivers, get you back up to speed, save you time tonight. That way, you're not completely reliant on a show. I don't know if I'll be able to do a show, but here's the problem with the show. Let's say I do a show and I give out picks and they hit. We all play the same people. We all split the pot. That's not good. Say I give out picks and they're wrong. That's not good. So DFS NASCAR is different than other DFS games where there's big player pools where shows can do that and are beneficial. With small player pools, it just doesn't work. If I give out the picks, we all split. We all either split the wings or split the losses. Usually you get maybe 4 of the picks right, and still that doesn't help you much. So what we'll do here is do a quick speed run, give you some information so you can build your own lineups. Use the spreadsheet to build your own lineups, differentiate, separate. Corey Heim, number 1. Just absolute heater. The Tricon trucks are about where KBM was when it was at the top of the game. Huge connection with Toyota Racing Development. Great crew chief in Scott Zipadelli. I mean, simply just look at his results last year. Look at his driver rating in these races and his finishing position in these races. But basically every intermediate track race and close to intermediate track race, Corey Heim is up front, leading laps, running fast laps, lock him in. We'll give him a 5-star rating. Propping a 5 here. I mean, you can do your research, but you probably already know. It's Heim time all the time. One of the races I do want to look at, and if you saw my tweet on Twitter or X, talking to AI, feeding it data, which is a better predictor of Las Vegas spring success. Do you go back to the Las Vegas race from way back last year, about 12 months ago, or do you go to Kansas? Not completely identical to Las Vegas, but a similar intermediate track with pretty high banking. I'm not so much worried about the difference in tire wear. Either way, AI says Kansas is a better predictor. Corey Heim won at Kansas. He was great everywhere. But Kansas is one of the races that you might want to look at. You might want to look at the lap-by-lap data in the spreadsheet for Kansas, all the notes and comments about Kansas. Something to look into. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he should have won at Las Vegas last year, if not for a pit road situation in Stage 3, which then allowed Rajah Caruth to come away with the victory. And that, mind you, was at the beginning of his run. He came out of the gates firing. Chandler Smith. We know what he's capable of as a driver. We know that Front Row Motorsports is a solid truck series team. Maybe not the best year last year as they transitioned from Zane Smith to Lane Riggs. But if you look at the data from Lane Riggs, at the end of the season, it took them a while to build back to where they were. Remember, they lost Zane Smith. They lost the crew chief. I can't remember his name. He went to Rick Ware. Was pretty awesome. And now I think he is back with Zane Smith at Front Row in the Cup Series. Blanking on his name. But they were transitioning. By the end of the year, they were running well. And look, by the way, Lane Riggs, end of the year, really strong at Kansas. Now, we could see that same kind of progression happen with Chandler Smith. New crew chief, new team, expanded team. It may be too early, but we'll get a pretty good idea in practice how close they are to getting there. Obviously, it's a team with sport. We'll give him a 4 rating. You could argue for a 5, but right now let's just leave that spot for Corey Heim. Justin Haley, Spire fielding a lot of trucks this weekend, but again, Spire won last year. Spire, very strong Chevy connection. I believe also some strong Hendrick connections. Have put together pretty good one-and-done races, part-time jobs for people. I like him, maybe a 4.5. Not quite to put him on the level as Heim. You know, sometimes you worry guys jumping in trucks. Are they really going to be able to do it? But again, going from Cup to truck's probably a lot easier than going from Cup to Xfinity because the trucks are going to handle a lot more similarly. Majeski, I'll throw a 4 in here. The defending champ, Joe Shear, really good. But when we look at intermediate tracks for ThorSport, now all ThorSport trucks are not created equal, as it seems these days. But Majeski and his team are definitely the top of the top. But even then, a lot of Majeski's strength comes at the shorter tracks, the flatter tracks, the tracks that lean into his late model background. And we have not seen the similarity in speed. Tricon definitely has faster trucks at the intermediate tracks, and they sometimes take a step back to ThorSport when it comes to short track races. So Majeski's fine, but you can clearly see in the data that Heim had been much better. Daniel Hemrick now taking over the 19 that Eckes had been fielding. We know that McAnally is a very solid team. Same goes for Chandler Smith, goes for Daniel Hemrick. We got to wait and see as the transition happens. We have a crew chief change here. We're not sure what kind of speed's going to come out of them. We'll get a decent idea in practice. We know that Hemrick is Hemrick. In his defense, he hasn't always had the greatest equipment, although you could argue that in his JGR run he did, and still, I guess he did win a championship, but he wasn't leading laps, running fast laps, dominating the series. And if I had to spin up on anyone right now, it's going to be Corey Heim. Corey Heim is more than likely going to have the fastest truck. Corey Heim likes to lead laps. Hemrick could get a top 3 finish. He could cycle to the lead at some point, because, with the truck series, with short stages, you can pit early, you can get off cycle. But when it comes down to stage 3, if I had to guess who's going to run away with it, I would go with Gillen. Unless, of course, we get Tricon Gillenheim. We get people doing fuel savings, which we did see at Kansas last fall. Guys stretching it out on fuel. Worked for some, not for others. It just depends. Do we get a action-packed Friday night of craziness? Because these guys have been itching over the last 2 weeks to get behind the wheel. We could. We've seen some crazy Las Vegas, or we could see some lap turn in Las Vegas. Either way, still just going to lean Heim. I like Riggs a lot. I like where they're going. I like the improvement. As I show you, one of the interesting things about Riggs is he's not rating out really high right here. But the interesting thing, if you go to where they finish versus their rating, we sort it out. So Andre Perez, not really. That's not what I want to do. I want to do the opposite of that. We'll see that Lane Riggs finished a lot worse than he ran. He was typically a top 10 driver rating rank-wise. So if we look at the driver rating, which is factoring in their speed and running position and a bunch of different variables, and we see who was the best rated, just to simplify it, we put it into an integer form just as a quick guide. We'd want to dig deeper eventually. But he is, for all intents and purposes, a top 10 driver in most of his intermediate track races. And yet he never quite got to finishes. So maybe you think he's still snake bitten and you want to stay away. That's fine. But if we're just trying to evaluate him based on skill and speed, he clearly has it. Now, $9,000 is not really a cheap price tag for that. We also see that Corey Day didn't quite get the finish he deserved in a couple races. Bailey Curry as well suffered a lot of mechanical failures, crew chief changes. But overall, we'll talk about Bailey Curry in a second. Infinger. This is where, I know he's not ThorSport anymore, but it almost feels like this is ThorSport for all intents and purposes. Stankovic, crew chief. I like Infinger when we go to more of the short tracks. Same thing with ThorSport. Again, it's not ThorSport, but it has a lot of the similarities. But at the intermediate tracks, Infinger and even like a Ben Rhodes, they've really got to play games. And in the end, usually when the dust settles, speed is speed. And you're going to see a guy like Heim or Front Row or McAnally take over the lead. Although Infinger and Robaugh do have a connection with McAnally. So these are close to McAnally trucks. Raja won this race last year, but But other than that, he was right there at the Infinger. Can he get a top 10? Yes. But is he going to lead laps and run fast laps? More than likely not. These plays pretty much only hit for me if I'm looking at double-digit place differential, which means I need Caruth or Enfinger starting around 15th. They're capable of top 5s, but pushing into the top 3 is a stretch. If Caruth is starting 11th or 12th, I'm not really that excited. Same thing with Enfinger. But the closer they get to 20, then the more excited I can be. Because ultimately, are they capable of a top 5? Yes, for 2 reasons. One, they have enough speed, they have enough experience, but 2, someone in the front is going to make mistakes. There's going to be wrecks. There's going to be pit road issues. So let's say Enfinger is in 15th. Is he capable of moving into 10th? Very easily. Then is he capable of getting a couple more spots via attrition and other drivers making mistakes? Absolutely. Caden Honeycutt in the Premier Nice truck of 45. Now this number's changed over the years. I've got one of the things in here you can look at is what has this truck done, but based on number, statistically, kind of hard to look at it because Nice has kind of changed the numbers around. The 45 truck specifically hasn't done great, but this isn't the same 45. The numbers aren't really, with the teams that changed it around, Chastain was driving a different number for them, so you kind of got to deal with it. It's always hard to follow the specific numbers, but if we were to look at the 98, which really has been pretty stable in terms of the years, you get a pretty good number. The 11, you get a pretty good number, 112 speed score here. 9 top 3s, 3 wins over the data sample that I'm using. But nonetheless, Phil Gould is the premier crew chief at Nice. This is the premier truck. Caden Honeycutt was very solid last year, 4th at Kansas. You look at his intermediate track results. Sort this back by this. 4th at Kansas. That's what we like to see. 2nd at Charlotte. Typical intermediate track. Boom, boom. Good intermediate track rating. 2nd overall, if we look at the median intermediate track results. You got to like Honeycutt. Now, I think I might bump him up to, I'll give him a 4 based on the slight salary savings that we are getting compared to others. If he's starting in the top 5, might be tricky, but I don't mind playing Honeycutt starting in the top 10. Ankrum. Yeah, here's the thing. I don't ever want to play Ankrum. And then every once in a while, Ankrum puts a gun to your head because he's starting in the very back. And then he pulls the trigger and wrecks on the first or second lap. We've all been there. We've all experienced it. Ankrum is an anchor. He sinks. He doesn't do anything. He's been around for so long. When is he ever going to develop? He has always had quality equipment. It never works out. Let's just hope and pray that he does not start in the back and do it to us again. William Sawalich. Let's see what the kid's got. Tricon, good truck, new to the series-ish. ARCA superhero. 8,300 is not a bad deal for a kid that TRD is fully invested in. Tricon is fully invested by Toyota. 8,100, I can get on board with that. I'll give him a 4. If I'm going to give Caden Honeycutt a 4. Same story, though. Starting in the top 5, I'm not really on Bill Sandwich. But 10th, Bill Sandwich becomes a possibility. Ben Rhodes really is Dusty Rhodes. Right? The American dream, the American nightmare, Cody. Bringing in some AEW, WWE. Ben Rhodes is Dusty Rhodes. He does not have it anymore. You can go through all of his results. When Ben Rhodes does it right, it's usually through smoke and mirrors, which, again, it is Vegas, and they do have magic shows. And so Ben Rhodes could pull off some magic and get a finish. But when we talk about Ben Rhodes, we're typically talking about place differential. If he's starting around 20th at $8,000, I have no problem. Anywhere else, I'm not really encouraged. But I would also keep your eye on some of the speed. Now, we have seen him have terrible practice sessions and then just through attrition in a race, move to the front. So you can't completely eliminate Dusty Rhodes because he doesn't go out and lay down the fastest laps in a Las Vegas practice session. But zooming out, Over the drivers that we've already discussed, no roads lead to roads. Gio Ruggiero coming up from ARCA, similar to Bill Sandwich. Kind of got to wait and see on what he's got, but he does have a good crew chief in Donnelly, who I believe was with, wasn't, well, you have to look at one of the spreadsheets to cross-reference it. I think I talked about it in a crew chief podcast a while ago. He is fine. We'll see where he goes. Mosak coming up from ARC Experience, late model experience. Pretty solid, underrated driver. Going to be in decent equipment. Decent equipment. We'll see. Not the greatest. Friesen. There's hardly a reason to play Friesen. Now, we give Friesen a little bit harder of a time. I think people fade him a little too often than they should. And the reason is it's probably a little more subconscious than anything. We remember in 2019, he was at his prime. We were expecting big things. And then as his team changed manufacturers during COVID, they really struggled. And there is just this reputation of Friesen's not that good. Well, Friesen's a small team. They had rose to the top, surprisingly, by 2019. Then we had high expectations and everything went wrong at the wrong time. And now it's been printed in our brain. Is it still a top 10 team? Yes. Weren't they always a top 10 team? Yes. For some reason in 2019, we loved them as a top 10 team. Now we think that they are garbage. They're not garbage. They're not great. It's an okay, decent team out there fighting to survive. But end of the day, before we get to day, he's not leading a lot of laps. He's not running a lot of fast laps. Now you do get a discount here. It's just going to come down to, can I get some place differential? Can we make it work? We'll quickly look at his intermediate track results from last year. And you'll see, look, these are pretty solid numbers for a one-truck team, especially at the end of the season. He's running top 10. He has speed. Overall, medium-wise, he's fifth. And at 7,500, I'm kind of want to boost him up to a 4. But again, that memory, that meme is still stuck in my head of he's not that good because we had these high expectations and manufacturing change during COVID was the worst possible move they could have ever made. They didn't know, obviously, when they switched it over to Toyota. And I don't even know if they are still Toyota. Anyway, Corey Day, superstar, dirt track racer, Kyle Larson, Jeff Gordon said, put this kid in a car. Well, we got a truck. All right, put him in a truck. And if Larson says this is the next great driver, then I'm all about it. I'm all for it. We'll see how it works out. Again, not the greatest finish at Kansas, but he was running much better. You got Brian Patty as the crew chief. You know that this team's going to have support. They've had several weeks to prepare. Now, yeah, it's an issue being that racing a truck at Vegas is nothing like running a sprint car on dirt. But if Larson thinks this kid can drive whatever, then the kid can drive whatever. He's got a little bit of Xfinity and truck experience. So let's bump him up for 7,300 for a Spire truck with the next great driver. I can get on board with that. Tanner Gray had a really good Kansas race. We've been playing Tanner Gray for years. We've expected everything from Tanner Gray for years. He does get a crew chief upgrade in Jeff Hensley this year, who didn't necessarily have the best success with Taylor Gray. But if you go back to before when his run with, I think he did some time with GMS. I know he did the time with Thor Sport, with Grant Enfinger. He knows the trucks. He knows Vegas. If anyone can put some speed together, it will be Jeff Hensley. And if I'm not mistaken, he might have been with Tanner Gray at the end of last year. Either way, Tanner Gray ran really well at Kansas last year. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is the year that Tanner Gray finally steps forward. And at the end of the day, it's a $7,100 Tricon truck. He's got plenty of experience. He is discounted. The only thing hurting him is, again, a meme in your brain of how many times has Tanner Gray burned you? Plenty of times. But he's come through as well. One of the things you can look up in the spreadsheet is how many times a driver has been a value pick. You can also find out how many times last season did a guy hit optimally. Like one of the interesting things I came across looking at Timmy Hill, who I don't believe is in the race. Timmy Hill last year, and we know kind of the play that is Timmy Hill. It's cheap play, moves forward a little bit, scores some points. And overall, as a value pick, being under $7,000 and then scoring in the top 20 in terms of DFS, he hit almost like 80% of the time, 85% of the time, Timmy Hill returned a decent value, meaning got in the top 20 in terms of fantasy points, was under that 7K mark. But if you looked at how many times did the Timmy Hill pick work as an optimal, how many times were you told over and over and over, play Timmy Hill, play Timmy Hill? He only was optimal twice. So if you listen to advice about playing Timmy, then you hit twice. That's not the great advice. And I understand how we could kind of fall into that problem where he's always scoring points and overall he does decent and he's going to help you get to that cash min. But the Timmy Hill pick, only twice was it optimal last season. And it's very similar for a lot of these guys at the bottom. Again, if he were hitting more often, his price would go up. And so he always kind of stays in that value range. Matt Crafton, I don't know. Dusty Rhodes, Crafton, the bottom of the Thor sport. I mean, Thor really is, there's Majeski and then not the Resky. You know, Rhodes, Dusty, Crafton his pants, and then Jake Garcia, not for Mia. I do like me some Luke Fenhouse in the house. Get it on. I have been impressed by this kid. Again, another good late modeler, although that doesn't necessarily translate the best into the series. All right, let's go quick. Let's get moving. Don't like Crafton. Bailey Curry was very solid last year. 6,800. I can get on board with that. Jake Garcia, not really encouraged by it. Again, there is definitely a divide in Thor. I like Luke Fenhouse, but I'm not going to be super crazy and think that he's a must play. We'll see with Andre Perez. Arca Kid gets promoted into Spire. Let's see how the Spire trucks go. Maybe kind of follows the path of, I mean, what if he follows the path of Raja Kruth last year? We didn't really know what to expect by him getting a full season, a full ride with Spire. Obviously, Spire is serious about racing. Sometimes I worry about them having, they're doing too much, being in too much of a sports entertainment space, but they clearly have speed. I'll give him at least a 3. Maybe surprises like Raja Kruth did last year. Matt Mills just never can get it done. This is, it's a niche truck. It should be okay. It's Mike Shiplet, one of the better crew chiefs in all of the series, but they just never could get through races. Jack Wood, I'll bump up a little bit just because we like the McAnally speed. Very inconsistent, hard to play him. Dawson Sutton finished 5th at Kansas last year. It's because he stretched fuel. But the Rackley cars are not terrible. Chad Kendrick is a good crew chief. 6,000 for Sutton now with a year of experience. I can get on board with that. No Tony from me. Tony, no. Spencer Boyd actually is very consistent in terms of returning value, but does not hit as an optimal very often. Goes out there, is very much Timmy Hill 2.0. Young trucks are just not what they used to be, and you've got Bird with very little experience. Going to be low on that. And then we got the 3 Rayum trucks here. I have moderate, encouraging hope for Rayum this year, but I do worry when they roll out 3 trucks. I know it says Max Siegel. Technically, Siegel still owns the number 2 truck, and kind of, but it's not, the old number 2 with Nick Sanchez. It's not that same developmental racing thing connected to whatever Chevy team they're connected to. I believe Spire. It's all Rayum. It's all, Austin Wayne Self-Sold team mixed with Kevin Sawinski's team, mixed with Josh Rayum, all kind of working together. They're also kind of connected in the Xfinity series, AMS. But obviously, Malozzi, whatever, goes out there, social media presence, buys a ride every once in a while. Can't get behind that. Much rather take Rayum, who I have some hope for this year. And Frankie, probably, if he's starting in the back at 5,100, we can punt with him. I can't imagine Carroll is able to finish this race. Typically only runs those southeastern races at the plate tracks and short tracks. The equipment's not the greatest. All right, that'll do it. Thanks for joining me on the Fantasy NASCAR podcast. See you guys soon. Oh, wait. RaceForThePrize.com, Venmo, PayPal, Cash App. Maybe just give me a tip because you like the video. Maybe you buy the spreadsheet. Pricing is at the website. Pricing is on my Twitter at RaceForThePrize.